Good morning. How is everybody today? How's that, a little better? There we go. Welcome. Thank you, Beth. Welcome to everybody present here today and to all joining us by live stream. My name is Scott Hensey, and I'm a member of this congregation, and it's good to be with you on this beautiful, bright summer day. We take pleasure in greeting our guests and visitors. Are there any members who have brought a guest today? We might have one. Or they, oh, please, stand up and, we'd love that. Hi. Welcome, and your name? Elsa, welcome, welcome. Ah, very nice. Welcome. Welcome. Glad you're here today. Well, those of you visiting, we invite you to join us for coffee and conversation in the foyer outside the room this morning after worship. Stop by the welcome table and say hi, where there's friendly folks that can answer your questions and information about the variety of activities that we have here at All Souls Church. Be aware that this room has 2 emergency exits in addition to the front doors on each side behind me. And please notice the announcements in your bulletin and on the screen, and know that almost all meetings and events are open to everyone. We welcome your questions, comments, reviews, and responses to the service on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the many multitudes of social media that's out there. That also brings up a point I'd like to address. We don't normally make announcements from the pulpit, but we need you to know that our congregational email list has been hacked, and scammers are sending emails to our members from Kendyl's address, asking them to purchase gift cards and send them photos of the barcodes. Once this happens, the scammers have the money, and there is nothing to be done. Indeed, the gift card sellers will not refund the purchase, even if you don't send the pictures to the scammers. We need everyone to be aware that nobody from All Souls will ever ask for anything that involves you spending money by email. Any message, no matter who it comes from, that asks for this, it is a scam. Until you have talked to a live person here at the church office, do not let your willingness to be helpful, we're very helpful people here, be exploited by unethical people. We want our church to be a safe place for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to this Sunday of solidarity with our Unitarian Universalist family from across the country. A week ago on Thursday evening, thousands of our fellow UUs gathered to mark the passages of those who serve our congregations in the profession of ministry. They welcomed new ministers into fellowship and celebrated those who had passed their preliminary reviews. They offered gratitude to ministers retiring from active service and remembered with tenderness those who touched our movement with their many gifts who died during the past year. This service of the living tradition is invariably a solemn and joyful and deeply moving experience. No such event would be complete without a sermon calling our ministry, the work of both professionals and lay members as well, to new visions of the mission that we are pursuing together. Muslim author Samir Salmanovic and my colleague, the Reverend Stephen Kendrick, invite us into conversation in these words. We are here to face the truth about ourselves, about this faith we love, and the ways in which it presently serves others and the world, as well as to open ourselves to ways it can be better and more joyful and reflect our potential and our core values. Like never before, the presence of the other in all its beauty, fragility, dignity, and need is demanding our answers. These questions, if answered, might demand that we change our theologies, our liturgies, our practices. The bondage of certainty can supplant the freedom of faith and make it impossible for us to say, we don't know. We don't have the answers. We apologize. We want to change. What can we do to make things right? We want to know the ways we are bound to one another, as well as to larger religious movements normally beyond our sight and vision. We are gathered to learn, to unlearn, and to move forward. We say we are open and diverse, and yet it is too easy to feel stuck in old patterns and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much our tradition as our comfort. We want to answer the call to service to the world that needs our message, our hope, our revived energy. The heart of a religion that will bless the world will beat at its edges. Last Thursday evening, my colleague, the Reverend Lindy Ramsden, explored the beating heart of our faith at the edges of this planet, whose well-being is a sacred responsibility that calls for our hope, our energy, our blessing. Today, we will also receive her words, and so make the connection to that annual gathering, which so powerfully shows that neither we as individuals nor we as a congregation are hoping or visioning or struggling or believing alone. In that awareness, we light this chalice flame, symbol of the faith traditions of Unitarianism and Universalism, uniting us across the miles and across the years with all who seek integrity, connection, and joy in a world of justice and peace.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Sierra, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Thanks, Sierra. Now let's rise as you're willing or able and speak once again the words of our promise to one another in community. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And let's remain risen for our opening song.
Standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel. Over the edge and wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, we are kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in a beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upon me, hail the great winds urging me on. Greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Have a seat. Here in this place, we celebrate the presence of the other in all its beauty, fragility, dignity, and need. The universe is so much larger than our isolated selves, and we need connection in order to make us whole. I invite you now to turn to someone nearby, preferably someone you did not arrive here with, and extra points if it's someone under the age of 20. Wish them, yeah, I think the kids are maybe not here as much today. Wish them a good morning and tell them something that you like about the summer season. Maybe it's a good time for ice cream, or watching your garden grow, or vacations, or long, late evenings, or fireworks on the 4th of July. What is the sweetness of summer for you? Now, just in case, let's allow any of the children who are here to go to their classes with song.
Go now in peace, may love guide all your ways. Beauty be the blessing of your nights and days. Truth on your lips and kindness in your deeds. Faith to follow what the human spirit leads.
People sometimes ask me whether we receive financial support from a national Unitarian Universalist organization. And the answer is that we as a congregation do not. We sometimes use support services or advice from our national association, like educational curricula or payroll advice. But it's actually the local congregations that send money to support the work of our association's board and many national staff. The one exception to this is the Living Tradition Fund, which exists to help ministers in financial emergencies. Usually this means recent seminary graduates who struggle in low or part-time starting salaries and high student debt, or retired ministers whose minimal savings during years of being underpaid have now been obliterated by inflation. The fund also helps ministers whose families are confronted with sudden or severe loss or crisis, like chronic medical disability or terminal illness, or losing homes to fire or flooding. The Living Tradition Fund has only one source of income, and that is contributions from UU members. Offerings are sometimes made at ordination or installation services to the fund, but the collection at the annual service of the Living Tradition at General Assembly provides its greatest resource. Our church has not recently hosted an ordination or an installation, so this morning we take this opportunity to connect with the larger movement and express our gratitude for ministers past, present, and yet to come by inviting everyone to make a generous donation to the work of the Living Tradition Fund. Who knows? You might be making it possible for your own next beloved pastor in years to come to stay in ministry today instead of dropping out to pay for their child's medical care. In support of the enduring ministry of our free faith, this morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Please join me. Dedications to the offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission, the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change towards a just and compassionate society.
From Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. The grounds for hope are in the shadows, in the people who are inventing the world while no one looks, who themselves don't know yet whether they will have any effect, in the people you have not yet heard, of who will be the next Cesar Chavez, the next Noam Chomsky, the next Cindy Sheehan, or become something you cannot yet imagine. In this epic struggle between light and dark, it's the dark side, that of the anonymous, the unseen, the officially powerless, the visionaries, and subversives in the shadows that we must hope for. For those on stage, we can just hope the curtain comes down soon and the next act is better, that it comes more directly from the populist shadows. Hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. It's an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures, and the grinding down of the poor and marginal. To hope is to give yourself the future, and that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable.
Please join me in the following litany. The congregational response will be on the screen. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. We are earth. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. We are earth. Remember you are this universe, and this universe is you. We are earth. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance that language is, that life is. Remember. We are earth. We remember.
The Reverend Lindy Ramsden is a 1984 graduate of Starr King School for the Ministry in California and has served as senior minister of the First Unitarian Church of San Jose and as executive director and senior minister of the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Ministry of California. She has been long at the forefront of work for human rights and environmental justice, and now serves as the Director of Partnerships and Emerging Programs at Starr King School. Her sermon is entitled, "It is Time Now." Some of you have been aware of the ongoing deficiencies of our sound system. This morning may be an example. We'll see how it goes, and if it doesn't work at all, we'll do something else.
In the mid-90s, the last time General Assembly was in Spokane, I was waiting in the Seattle airport for the final leg of the journey when I began noticing fellow UUs arriving from other parts of the country. You can spot them across the airport sometimes. An older colleague in a dapper tweed jacket caught my eye. It was the Reverend Nathaniel Laureate from Arizona. While from different generations of ministry, we had each served the First Unitarian Church of San Jose as our first ministerial settlement. He had started his ministry in 1945, and I began there 40 years later. From time to time, Nathaniel had mailed me a handwritten note expressing his support and encouragement, providing a tangible connection to this generational endeavor that is our service of living tradition. I truly appreciated these simple gestures of respect and kindness from a minister who was about the age of my father. As Nathaniel and I visited in the airport, I soon discovered that this was not an ordinary General Assembly for him. After 50 years of parish ministry, during which time he had served 5 different congregations, Nathaniel, as of one day earlier, was now officially retired. Just that day prior, he had preached his final sermon. I was impressed. A few months shy of my first decade in ministry, I found it very hard to imagine how one would sustain ministry for 50 years. I had not even been alive that long. We shared stories and conversation on that short flight, one of which continues to inform my ministry to this day. Nathaniel was just 23 years old when he was invited by the First Unitarian Church of San Jose to be their candidate for ministry. Organized and eager to make a good impression, he prepared his 2 worship services for the Sundays that would begin and conclude his candidating week. His first Sunday service went well, but little did he know what was in store. It was August 1945, and the very next day, after his first sermon, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, followed by the bombing of Nagasaki a couple days later. I tried to imagine what it must have been like at age 23 to be so far from home, brand new to ministry, trying to land a job. How did he find the spiritual and emotional resources to minister in such an earth-shattering, history-altering moment? Ever since Nathaniel told me the story of how his ministry began, I have tried to remember that there will be times when we simply will not know what to do. History does not always inform the present. Sometimes we are called to religious leadership in a radically changed and morally traumatizing landscape. I believe that now is one of those times. From Deuteronomy 30:19. I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life, so that you and your descendants may live. That you and your descendants may live. Over the past 34 years of ministry, I have attended many services of the living tradition. Whether arriving exuberant or exhausted, it has been a blessing to step out of the pulpit and into the pew, joining with colleagues to celebrate the generational arc of religious leadership, honoring those who have preceded us and welcoming those who will continue long after we have hung up our stoles. As June 28th marks the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge, with deep respect and gratitude, those trans elders of color who courageously claimed their own freedom, refusing to acquiesce to another night of police violence and intimidation. While the work is far from done and our trans and non-binary kin are still targeted in cruel and demeaning ways, I do want to recognize the generations of queer organizers, artists, ministers, and movement builders who have harnessed the momentum of love and outrage to create significant change over this past century. I am personally grateful. Those who came before me pushed and cracked open doors that I was able to walk through. They made it possible in 1985 for me to enter our ministry as an openly lesbian minister. To have been offered this opportunity that others helped to create makes me particularly committed to live in a manner that will help to pay it forward. Tonight, as we recognize and honor our living tradition that unfolds through generations of ministry, let us also feel the weight and the promise of the as yet unwritten future. We hold this living tradition in trust for generations yet to come. So what does that look like today? In an era in which our larger culture and economy are rife with intergenerational injustice, what some name as intergenerational theft. How can we live into a commitment to intergenerational solidarity? Young people are providing powerful leadership, confronting systemic racism, calling out complacency, and mocking the lies and institutional intransigence that puts their lives, their future, and the planet at risk. They are organizing their peers, proclaiming their moral witness, and refusing to accept the unacceptable. Witness the livid grief of the survivors of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting as they call out the NRA and the BS of cautious politicians. Respect the masterful tenacity of young activists in the streets of Ferguson, harnessing local and national outrage to hold police to account and stop violence against Black lives. and listen to 15-year-old school strike for climate activist Greta Thunberg, who, when invited to Davos to address powerful corporate and government leaders at the World Economic Forum this past January, delivered a speech that was heard around the world. She said, "Either we prevent temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees, or we don't. Either we avoid chain reaction of unraveling ecosystems, or we don't. Now we all have a choice. We can either create transformational action or continue with business as usual and fail." I often hear adults say, "We need to give the next generation hope." But I don't want your hope. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I do every day, and I want you to act. Behave like our house is on fire, because it is. Unwilling to settle for anything less than the spiritual, financial, and political commitment that is commensurate with the scale of the crisis we are facing, young leaders are calling us out and inviting us in. Greta is right to be angry and alarmed. She is right to insist on telling the unvarnished truth to power. For at least 3 decades, twice as long as she's been alive, climate scientists have been trying to get the world to take notice as they warned us all of the danger inherent in a warming planet, only to have their research and integrity discredited by fossil fuel-funded campaigns working to sow public doubt, distrust, and discord. So with reports from real climate scientists and experts not getting the public attention they deserve, the humorist and educator Bill Nye, the science guy, he recently stepped into the fray and brought his shtick to late-night TV on John Oliver's Last Week Tonight. So we're going to try and channel a little Bill. Okay, now I'm going to need your help with this, because in order to share what Bill Nye told his audience in a manner that is suitable for tonight's worship service, I will need your help. So when I wave my hands, would you please call out a loud bleep? So let's practice. Ready? Bleep! Very good. One more time. Ready? Bleep! Okay. All right, let's try this. First, you have to imagine there's a globe over here, and I'm taking a blowtorch to it, and it's burning. By the end of this century, if emissions keep rising, the average temperature on Earth could go up another 4 to 8 degrees. What I'm saying is the planet is on fire. There are a lot of things we could do to put it out. Are any of them free? No, of course not. Nothing's free, you idiots. Grow the up. You are not children anymore. I did not mind explaining photosynthesis to you when you were 12. But you are adults now, and this is an actual crisis. Got it? got it. The reality is sinking in part because so many more of us are starting to directly experience the consequences. I am currently developing a climate, faith, and justice initiative at Starr King School for the Ministry, which includes teaching seminarians to be better prepared to serve their communities during times of climate disaster. It has been a sobering experience to realize that there are no shortage of UU ministers for my students to interview who have already experienced the great challenge of ministering to their congregations during massive hurricanes, cataclysmic mudslides, terrifying wildfires, and the floods of biblical proportion. As Bill and I taught the late-night audience some climate science, perhaps we can ask John Oliver to line up another guest professor to teach the second half of the lesson, one on climate justice. America must understand that those both within and beyond our nation who are most vulnerable to climate disasters, those who have the least access to resources to prepare, survive, rebuild, and recover, are also those who have made the smallest contributions to causing this hot mess. Climate injustice is layered on top of centuries of colonialism and conquest, stolen land, enslaved labor, and indigenous genocide. There are important signs of progress, but there still is such a long way to go to acknowledge and honorably address the historic need for truth-telling, for reparations and healing. But now is the time to go all in, to think big, to address foundational issues. Massive public and private resources will be mobilized. The question is where and in whose interest will those investments be made? It is so important to leverage this moment and this time of gathering momentum to advance equity, to create climate justice. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. Now, nothing slows momentum like giving up hope. And hope is not optional for those whose lives stretch out into the next 70 years. For me, hope is not a feeling to have or not have. It is a virtue to be cultivated, a religious practice that nourishes your soul. As Rebecca Solnit instructs, hope is not the belief that everything will be fine. Hope is an embrace of the unknown, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Were we to translate this idea into Unitarian Universalist theology, to me it sounds a lot like our teaching that revelation is not sealed. Our youth and young adult leaders are stepping forward and into action, and they do deserve our engaged support. Our chalice sliders this evening, Allie and Amelia, are organizing Unitarian Universalists to create climate justice, and Levi lives on a barrier island in Florida threatened by the rising seas. With the support of our Children's Trust, Levi and 20 other young leaders from across the U.S. are suing the federal government to secure the legal right to a stable climate and a healthy atmosphere for current This is such foundational work, and I am so glad to hear your enthusiastic applause for their leadership. Now, in October of 2018, just last year, the International Panel on Climate Change, the global body of leading climate scientists, issued a new report. What most caught my attention was the deadline. It was so much shorter than I had imagined. So the Earth has already warmed 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. If we hope to limit that warming to no more than 1.5 degrees and avoid catastrophic climate impacts, they said we only have till 2030 to reduce emissions by 45%. And by 2050, a mere 2 decades later, we must be fully carbon neutral. Really? By 2030? That's only 11 years from now. But as a Sunday morning sermon writer knows, there's nothing like a real deadline to sharpen the mind. I've been realizing that I need to shift my understanding of the climate crisis and the imperative to create climate justice from a cause among causes to an existential demand, something like our commitment to dismantling white supremacy that needs to be woven into all aspects of my life and my ministry. I have to admit that an 11-year window makes it much more concrete. I can count out the years: 2019, 2020, 2021, all the way through 2030. I try to imagine how old I and my loved ones will be. And then I think, what do I need to stop doing to find time to prioritize this work? How much time can I take off work to participate in this pivotal election in 2020? While I have become a train rider instead of an airplane flyer, my own life is far from carbon neutral. What steps am I, or we, able to take to become more consistent, a part of the solution, and less a part of the problem? These are core questions for all of us and for all of our institutions to answer over these next 11 years. What a very strange thing to find oneself at such a watershed moment in the history of the planet, when the lives of generations to come depend in large measure on what happens during this relatively brief window of time. If you are wanting your life and ministry to make a difference, not only in the short term, but in geologic time, this inflection point in history is quite a moment to be called into religious life and service. Sometimes a call can feel like an invitation, and at other times like an imposition. The story of Moses' call shows him out minding his flocks and minding his own business when God calls out of the burning bush and charges him to lead his people out of Egypt. Moses, although respectful, was fairly quick to point out his own inadequacies, suggesting that the heavenly nominating committee call on someone else. Someone else with more leadership skills, more suited to serve and succeed in that pivotal moment. While God did not let Moses off the hook, I am glad to note that he did suggest a leadership team be formed, with the more eloquent Aaron taking on their communications portfolio. We are not meant to do this work alone. I remember overhearing a caller to a radio show who asked the presenter what they could do as one individual to make a difference in the global climate crisis, and I loved the respondent's blunt answer. The most important thing you can do is to stop being an individual. Systems change when you join and work with others. It's such a good point, and it applies to us as individuals and to our congregations and communities as well. We have so much to learn from this crisis, from each other, from the force of life itself. On the cover of your order of service is a photo of an old Western juniper whom I visit from time to time. When sitting at the foot of this master, I am reminded of the majesty and power of creation that far exceeds my grasp, my will, and my time on this earth. Richard Powers, in his recent novel Overstory, says through one of his characters, "People aren't the apex species they think they are. Other creatures, bigger, smaller, slower, faster, older, young, more powerful, call the shots, make the air, and eat sunlight. Without them, nothing." It could be the eternal project of mankind to learn what forests have figured out. As I live the years that remain in my life, I seek to be guided by and accountable to both the ancestors and those who are yet to come. When the children's children look back to see how we handled this moment in this crisis, the impacts of which will profoundly shape the landscape of their lives and those of generations to come, what will they see? Will the choices we made show them that we loved them, that we thought of them, that we valued their lives over our convenience? We are being called into intergenerational solidarity to link generation to generation to generation. We must rise all together that we may answer this calling with love. Amen.
So glad to have the chance to share that with you. And now I invite you to rise and join in a new song, which is one they close the service with in Spokane.
The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The land is holy, and so are we. The land is holy, and so are we. The land is holy, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. called to be. This is where we are called to be.
We extinguish this flame here and in congregations all across the country and the globe, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we all carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. So let your hope break down the door and shove you out into the world. Give yourself to the future. Let us all be visionaries and subversives in the shadows. For it is our dreaming together of a better world that makes the present inhabitable.